Your home holds prayers. Someone wants to profit off your pain. They walked through your hallway like it was already theirs. God heard the paper sign before you did. Your name is still on the deed, but not in their heart. Someone you loved opened the door to betrayal. It wasn't just listed. It was sacrificed. They said they were protecting you. They meant protecting themselves. This move is spiritual warfare, disguised as real estate. The walls remember what you forgot. God will not let them profit from holy ground. You weren't paranoid. You were prophetic. The buyer walks with a familiar limp. Your house has angels posted at the corners. They planned the sale the night you broke down. It was never about money. It was about exile. Your childhood room was shown to strangers. Someone smiled, signing your loss. The buyer asked for a key. Heaven changed the locks. You built a home. They're selling a memory. You didn't dream it. Your soul heard the transaction. Every creak in your floorboards is crying out. You gave them shelter. They gave you a goodbye in silence. Even the walls flinch when you mention their name. This sale was whispered, not spoken. Your name was erased while you were praying. What they did behind your back will haunt their steps. The buyer knows too much about you. This is not a coincidence. It's a calculated silence. You were supposed to inherit. They were planning to evict. The contract was written in betrayal. It wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. They called it just business. God called it dishonor. You gave them a bedroom. They gave you a backroom deal. The buyer once ate at your table. Even your childhood photos were touched without reverence. You dreamed of a storm. This is it. Your mother's prayers will not allow this transaction to stand. They used your trust as currency. There's a reason your spirit won't settle. The buyer smells like old memories and hidden motives. They tried to erase what God etched. Your home isn't a listing. It's an altar. This isn't foreclosure. This is foretelling. The one who betrayed you will live to regret signing. You thought it was protected. They found the weak place. Their silence was a weapon. Even the land grieves your absence. God is about to intervene in the middle of their contract. Your ancestors are standing in the front yard. If this touched your soul, don't scroll. Comment your favorite quote and subscribe for more. The buyer didn't find your house. They were sent. You let them inside your heart. They walked out with your home. A family member signed it. Heaven tore it up. They thought they sold wood and brick. They sold sacred ground. You were never supposed to leave. This is spiritual eviction. God is about to reverse the contract signed in darkness. The buyer sees it as property. You know it as sanctuary. You kept the lights on. They moved in shadows. The sale wasn't public, but heaven heard every detail. They listed your home and called it moving forward. The one who signed it never built it. Someone cried in your bedroom. It wasn't you. There's an angel standing by your old bedroom door. You lost a house, but they lost favor. Their hands trembled when they signed. Your spirit knew why. God will return it to you untouched by their intentions. It was never theirs to sell. The buyer doesn't know they purchased holy ground. They can take your things, not your legacy. This home remembers your voice and your silence. The deal is temporary. Your restoration will be generational. They called it just paperwork. You called it betrayal. Someone is pretending it was for your good. A cousin watched. A friend helped. Heaven recorded it. The buyer will wake up in rooms that reject them. Your name is still in the soil. The front door groaned when they opened it. Your spirit knew. What they rushed, God will reroute. You didn't lose it. You were repositioned. A name beginning with M is behind this deal. You don't need revenge. You need revelation. What was taken from you will speak against them. Your bloodline will know justice from this moment. Even your ancestors were present the night it was listed. There's a prophet in your bloodline whispering, "This isn't over." Their signature held greed. Yours held grace. A lawyer knew. An agent knew. You were kept in the dark. The buyer will ask to meet you. Don't go. The betrayal was layered in smiles. You were prayed for long before this contract. You were deceived but not defeated. God delayed the closing for a reason. They showed the buyer the kitchen, but not your grief. You are not homeless. You are being hidden. The buyer isn't your enemy, the seller is. Heaven is shaking the foundation of their plans. What was done in secret is now in the Spirit's courtroom. They called it closure. God calls it judgment. A door they forced will now be their downfall. The house knew it belonged to you. It wept when you left. They changed the locks. Heaven kept the keys. Your name still echoes through the walls. They lit candles where your prayers once burned. The buyer doesn't realize this was sacred ground. You were the home. The house was just the shell. They tried to erase you, but even the floorboards remember. You didn't walk away. You were spiritually removed. A prophet will walk past that home and feel your sorrow. The buyer sleeps in your old room and hears your weeping. The person who signed it off will not rest. You were grieving. They were negotiating. The house was full of your prayers. They sold power. Heaven will refund you in miracles. The back door was left open on purpose. Someone begged God not to show you the truth. It was never a sale. It was a spiritual robbery. Your home was listed while your heart was breaking. The buyer had no idea what they were stepping into. They bought a house but inherited a curse. God kept the receipts. You're about to be compensated spiritually and legally. They said, "You'll never go back." God says, "Watch me." Even the windows miss your gaze. They packed your memories like clutter. The buyer is a mirror. You're about to see their face. Every lie attached to that house will now unravel. You don't need the old house. You needed the revelation. What they listed behind your back will now lift you forward. The foundation is now cracked, but heaven will rebuild for you. You didn't just live there, you planted heaven there. That address is still under angelic surveillance. God never let you lose what was divinely assigned. A woman close to you made the call. What they built without you will fall without warning. You left, but the Spirit stayed. The buyer's hands are now trembling. The house isn't blessing them. It's rejecting them. Someone will call you, trying to explain. Don't answer. The roots of that land know your name. You were listed as absent, but heaven saw you present. They sold it for profit. God will buy it back in glory. A fire is coming to expose the secret deal. What they touched without permission is now marked. Your tears were sacred. That contract was not. The buyer is losing sleep. You're gaining clarity. You didn't lose shelter. You gained protection. The home is groaning for your return. Someone in the family pretended to forget. You were discussed over dinner. Heaven recorded it all. They sold the home, but not your history. Heaven watched them sign your name away. It was never just property. It was your altar. Someone traded your prayers for profit. Your home was secretly listed while you were still weeping. They took down your photos. The walls still cry. You felt the shift before they touched the deed. The buyer is connected to someone you forgave. Your silence was mistaken for surrender. You were evicted in the spirit before the papers were drawn. They smiled in your face, then whispered the deal. God let them move you so he could move for you. That buyer once promised they'd never hurt you. They sold your covering. God is rebuilding your crown. Your keys never unlocked betrayal, but theirs did. You left memories behind. They walked into holy consequence. The buyer isn't random. They're part of the plan. They listed your name as absent. Heaven said, chosen. The room you prayed in now makes strangers uneasy. Your roots were never theirs to dig up. The buyer dreamed of you last night and woke up shaking. God marked that address with fire long before you left. They thought you wouldn't find out. God made sure you did. The signature was forged spiritually. The cost will be eternal. They bought bricks. You carried blessings. Every lie tied to that address is now unraveling. You were cast out, but now you're being called in. Their victory was temporary. Your return will be divine. The buyer feels watched. That's your angels. You anointed the floor. They tracked in deception. It wasn't just betrayal, it was prophecy. They laughed when you left. Now they hear footsteps. That house remembers who sanctified it. The new owner will feel the weight of your prayers. The deal was signed under a cursed agreement. You weren't informed because you weren't supposed to stop it. They thought they won. They just opened a portal. God let them buy it to return it under fire. They tried to erase your legacy. Now it haunts them. That address was sacred. They treated it like a sale. The buyer knew your face before they saw the listing. You were never homeless. You were hidden. The house will reject every unclean motive. That home saw your tears. It will not stay silent. You were the soul of that structure. They bought a home but inherited warfare. God removed you so he could rewire everything. The buyer walked in. The light went out. You didn't lose the house. They lost heaven's covering. If this touched your soul, don't scroll. Comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more. The house is grieving you louder than you grieved it. They pretended it was abandoned, but God lived there. The buyer was warned in a dream. They ignored it. They called it real estate. God called it sacred ground. You laid hands on those walls. That oil still speaks. The buyer will feel displaced in their own purchase. They sold a story heaven was still writing. You outgrew the house. The house outgrew their lies. The buyer once sat at your table. God let it go to expose what was hidden. That property was in your bloodline for a reason. What they buried in that backyard will be unearthed. They listed it out of fear of your return. Your absence is opening their spiritual warfare. You had dreams there. They only saw dollar signs. Every footstep they take echoes your unspoken goodbye. You felt uneasy for a reason. They were negotiating behind prayers. The buyer will learn not to walk on consecrated land. You poured out love. They poured in manipulation. That home wasn't empty. It was spiritually sealed. The buyer asked if it came with peace. You were removed before the storm. You'll see their face again, in court or in prophecy. The betrayal came with a bow on it. They thought selling it would silence your legacy. Your name was crossed out, but not in heaven. The home started falling apart the moment you left. The buyer is regretting. The seller is hiding. They used your pain as permission. The new occupant smells your incense, but can't find peace. You planted love. They'll reap consequence. That buyer is part of your divine reversal. You'll return, not to stay but to reclaim. That address will testify. The house isn't done speaking. Someone close to you signed it over in silence. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. They didn't just sell the house. They sold trust. That buyer will apologize in your dreams. They listed it while you were sleeping. The house is calling your name in the spirit. You forgave too soon. God didn't forget. That sale triggered a spiritual reversal. The buyer will try to find you. Don't be found. You prayed in that hallway. Now it holds your echo. Someone cried after they left the key under the mat. The buyer doesn't know why they can't rest. That house is covered in your spiritual DNA. Your exit was sacred. Their entry is suspect. The foundation cracked as soon as you were removed. The house wasn't haunted. It was holy. They erased your name, but heaven inscribed you. The buyer felt watched. That was your angel. They sat where you wept. Now they feel it. Your child's laughter still lingers in the walls. They thought they'd win peace. They won revelation. You cried before they knocked. God sealed it then. You were removed before destruction hit. The new owner will leave sooner than expected. They never knew you anointed that home. The listing agent heard a whisper, "Return it." That house chose you. That's why they can't rest. A neighbor will contact you. They've seen things. You carried the soul of that space. The buyer's hands shook signing the deed. The new keys won't unlock what's divine. The house rejected them in silence. What you lost in silence, God will restore loudly. The buyer now sees visions they can't explain. Your pain became their inheritance. The blessing left when you did. They called it a steal. It came with a price. You were the final light in that house. That property won't yield peace until you're vindicated. A storm is coming, and it begins at that door. They bought a dwelling, but your soul was the temple. God turned the house into a courtroom. Your tears stained the floor. Heaven kept the pattern. The buyer's child cries at night for reasons no one knows. You didn't lose a home, you gained divine sight. That house was sacred. They desecrated the altar. They will move again. Quickly. God is already rewriting the deed. The buyer's dreams are now haunted by your truth. That home belonged to your prayers, not their price. Their gain is being reversed in the spirit. The land itself mourns your absence. They moved in, but couldn't settle. You thought you lost the battle. Heaven was just beginning. They exchanged your pain for property. The buyer's health is shifting. Every door they close opens one in your favor. They celebrated your silence. Now they fear your voice. The buyer will return the keys voluntarily. What they bought in shadow will be exposed in light. You are not displaced, you were delivered. The house has become a battlefield. The new owner feels watched. They are. Your spirit has never stopped walking those halls. The house was sold without your consent, but heaven never signed. Watch what gets returned to you next. If this touched your soul, don't scroll. Like, comment your favorite quote, and subscribe for more.